Hi folks, in this tutorial we are going to be looking at painting a grasslands or wetlands base as seen here on this Skaven miniature. So without any further ado, let's get started. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'll be using a blank 25mm base. Normally you'd have a model on yours, but for the ease of showing, I'm going to use a blank one. To start with, I'm going to apply an all-over layer of Stirland mud texture paint from Games Workshop. Texture paints provide a great foundation to start with your bases, as they are a nice sandy gritty texture with a paint colour pre-applied to them. Here I'm using a texture spatula just to apply a thin layer of this texture onto the base and then giving it some time to dry. It is important to give the texture paint enough time to dry before moving on to the next step. This can take a couple of hours depending on how thick you apply the texture paint. Now that the texture paint has completely dried, I'm going to give it an all-over wash with Nuln oil. And I'll be applying this neat straight from the pot and giving this a nice all-over coat. Once it's been applied, we can leave this model for about 30 minutes to dry completely. Once the wash is completely dried, we are now going to come in with various stages of dry brushing to add some colour back into the model. The first colour I will be using is Mournfang Brown from Games Workshop. With dry brushing, we want to take most of the paint off the bristles and work it into a paper towel, so there is very little paint actually left on the brush. We will then do a soft backwards and forwards motion over the model, and only the raised surfaces will catch the detail, leaving the darker brown and Nuln oil wash in the recesses. With dry brushing, it is always advisable to build up the colour to create a soft transition from a shadow to a lighter colour. It is very hard to go back to your original shadow once you've applied a couple of coats of dry brushing, so build up the layers. Once we are happy with our layer of Mournfang Brown, we are then going to come in with some Karak stone from Games Workshop. Once again, this is going to be a dry brush highlight, and we're going to apply this very softly, building up the colour to emphasise some lighter areas in the ground. Once you are happy with the dry brushing, we are then going to apply some pigments to the miniature. Here I'm using Aged Rust from Foliage. Aged Rust is a light brown that's almost orange in colour, and we'll be using an old brush to take a little bit from the pot and sort of smush it and blend it into the textures and paints that we've already got on. You only need a little bit of this, and you're going to, when you have a little bit on the brush, and work it into the miniature, feathering it out. And you want to be very careful when using pigments, because this does have a tendency to go everywhere and it does stain. Once we are happy with the rust coloured pigment, we're repeating the process using a bone coloured pigment. We want to focus on a smaller area of this, maybe just one splotch, and feather it in so we get a nice transition all the way from the Nuln oil shadow right through to a light dusty bone colour. With the ground textures done, we are now going to apply some flock to the miniature. Here I'll be using good old crafty PVA. It's very cheap and it's perfect for sticking flock to a miniature's base. So I'm going to apply some PVA in splodges in random places around the miniature. We don't want this looking too uniform. Here I'm sprinkling on some mixed dark green flock from Woodland Scenics onto the base and then tapping off the excess. I quite like the Woodland Scenics flock, especially the mixed ones, as they have a slight variety of tone which makes a really nice underbrush colouring. The last stage in the base is to use a small amount of light green clump foliage from Woodland Scenics. This is a nice tearable foam product that gives the impression of shrubs and bushes and can also be used on trees, and it's perfect for any form of scale miniature that you're doing. You just have to use either a small amount or a large amount depending on how big you want the bush. So here it's been stuck down to the base using good old PVA and then given some time to dry. You can apply as much or as little as you like to the base. And now, with the clump foliage applied, the grasslands or wetlands base is now complete. All that's left to do is to paint the rim of the base to match the rest of your army. Hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.